there's a large group of people that were into the previous cycle that are going to take profits at the exact same time, predicting that the markets are going to peak at, let's say, September of 2025. So I think if you look at the current markets and where we are at, I think that we are correlated towards liquidity and macroeconomics, which to me feels like we're going to experience a longer cycle as it takes more liquidity to make Bitcoin go to 400, 500, or even 500K or even higher.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today I'm here with the legend Michael, which is CIO and founder of MN Consultancy and Capital. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, man. It's a volatile market, but we're doing good.
Exactly. So super excited you are with us today. I remember meeting you in Singapore and then seeing you again in Amsterdam. So glad we cross paths in our lives. So thank you so much for doing this with me. But if you don't mind, can you share your journey? Can you tell us how have you got into crypto?
Well, likewise, I mean, crypto is it's just fun when you meet someone and then it's just a group of like people hopping to all the places on earth where they collab again and talk about crypto. And it was great, a great experience in Singapore. It was actually my first time being there. But my journey has been almost 8 years now. I've started at the end of 2016, beginning 2017, where I was still studying economics in Amsterdam. I'm based there. Basically, in the same week, my best friend showed me CoinMarketCap during the altcoin fiesta. And secondly, one of my student mates came in at a very hungover Wednesday morning talking about, hey, you need to check Bitcoin. I was like, what is that? That week, I bought my first altcoin. It was already during like the beginning of 2017, and I bought it, which then did a 6x in a week. And I remember that my mom said, well, you need to take your profits. When I do something, I just go in all in completely. So I invested like a few thousand euros that went to 10K and all the way back. But I knew that this was something for me. I like the risk, I like the adrenaline. And down that year, I joined some communities, Dutch ones, where I started reading about crypto, about Bitcoin, and it kind of clicked with my negative thesis towards studying economics. I always felt like I don't really know what I'm going to do with it, and I don't believe that this system actually works. And then Bitcoin just came around, and they orange pilled me quite heavily. Went full time at the end of 2017. Got my office at the Amsterdam Stock Exchange at the beginning of 2018, where I started my trading group. Actually came onto social media in October of 2017 and got to like 30K followers in a few months. So I was like, okay, this is crazy. I didn't really figure that having a social media presence was such a big thing. So my name was Crypto Michaël because like I didn't really like I just wanted to explore opportunities and see if I can connect to someone. And I've built out the trading group into 2021 with 15 to 18 people as staff. I had a wonderful time, changed my entire life during 2021 as well. Had my peaks, and then 2022 kicked in, where I basically went from having everything, living my life, into almost bankruptcy, as I didn't have my proper risk management appetite there. Basically, we kept on scaling up the company in 2022 while the revenue was going down, and my positions were losing value substantially. At some point, you just need to cut it off, which was during my trip in the Middle East, where you are. I was traveling to Oman, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and that was actually the 3 weeks where FTX collapsed, and I knew I need to restructure the entire company. So everybody left, and I started again with my girlfriend. We fired up a few new companies that are MN Consultancy, MN Capital, and I do a lot of marketing in the sense that I partner up with some projects, but I'm also making a lot of content on 2 YouTube channels nowadays and my X and Instagram account. So that's a little long intro, but that's my journey has been a rocky ride, um, and or a bumpy ride, and probably it will stay like this. But at least having my girlfriend on is making it a little bit more relaxed because she like puts me down when I need to.
What a story. Thank you for sharing it. I remember I've been following you for quite a while. So thank you for all the beautiful content you produce across two YouTube channel and of course your X account, which will be in the description of the video as always. Where do you think we are now? Because we kind of almost got 100,000. I think it was 99.8 or something like this. We've seen a correction ever since, which is I think totally normal. But are you expecting us to finish the cycle next year?
It's a tough question, you know. First of all, the fact that we're currently at 100K is great, but I do believe that if FTX didn't happen in 2021 or 2022, but he was shorting Bitcoin in 2021, I think the previous cycle should have gone higher. In a sense of where are we? I think we're just in the middle of the Bitcoin cycle, in the middle of the Bitcoin bull cycle. We are at the start of the altcoin bull cycle. And the question is, are we going to peak next year? And that question relies on the thesis whether the 4 year cycle still stands or whether it's connected to liquidity and macroeconomics. I think that over time, given that we are currently in newer cycles, which still has the impact of the halving, but you can actually see that the halving itself has a reduced impact on the moment itself. While on the other hand, we've got institutional investors through the ETF that need to rebalance their portfolio on completely different standards than a 4 year cycle. So, for instance, if the yields are going to go up, it's very likely that they will sell off their ETH because they expect that less people will be in ETH for yields and are going to move towards government bonds. So a lot of different factors are taking place, and you need to take into account that there's a large group of people that were into the previous cycle that are going to take profits at the exact same time, predicting that the markets are going to peak at, let's say, September of 2025. So I think if you look at the current markets and where we are at, I think that we are correlated towards liquidity and macroeconomics, which to me feels like we're going to experience a longer cycle as it takes more liquidity to make Bitcoin go to 400, 500, or even 500K or even higher. And on the other hand, if we experience the current bull cycle, we've just seen that at the end of 2023, Bitcoin started to break out. Altcoins did have a run for 2 to 3 months, but basically have seen an entire bear market year in 2024. So I think that in some sense, what we're going to expect is that we're likely peaking earlier, or we have a midterm peak like we saw this year with the altcoins in March, April, and then have another run going into 2026. I think that the overall conclusion is that we are just not going to experience the 4 year cycles anymore. We're going to experience slower markets, but this is still the final easy cycle that we're going through.
It makes a lot of sense, and thank you for explaining it so well. I completely agree. I think there are so many different factors playing into this cycle, and I know every time we're saying this cycle is different, but when you have ETFs coming in, when you have Trump, which is in more or less 50 days from the day of recording, is going to potentially announce a strategic reserve plan, which means buying 1 million Bitcoin in 5 years. Those things, they have to be considered. And like you said, there is a seasonality into this asset. So it's difficult to say what's going to happen, but I don't think this is the top. I don't think 100,000 will be the top. I think we will see another move coming up, that's for sure. When it comes to ETFs, are you worried? Do you like it? Because sometimes I have guests on the show and they're saying, well, ETFs, they go against Bitcoin and we don't like them. And other guests are completely into the ETFs. I personally think they are necessary. I actually like the ETF as a product, but what's your view?
I get like, especially if you ask the Bitcoin OGs, I think, or at least the Bitcoin maxis, I would say, then I can understand that they say, yeah, so basically Bitcoin is created out of 2008 as a response to bad, I would say, performance from the banks. Then it's quite weird to be cheering the fact that we currently have the ability for institutional investors to jump into the market. However, that's quite a like if you do not allow those investors to come into the markets and to allow some sort of regulation to kick in, you will never get anywhere. So you need the actual product to make it more liquid, make it more substantial, that a big mass adoption can take place. You should realize that by the fact that we are having MiCAR regulation in Europe and that Trump kicks in with a different regulation in the US is going to enable a large spread adoption, but it's going to somehow kill innovation as well, as the entry barrier is substantially higher for parties to join the markets. And innovation comes out of a decentralized world where everybody can jump into, and the best idea just wins after time. So I think in terms of adoption, it's going to be great. I think in terms of investors, you need to realize that if you are buying an ETF through BlackRock, it's scattered around a lot of participants there. The only concern that I currently have is the fact that Michael Saylor keeps on buying Bitcoin, and his stake is going to be bigger and bigger and bigger. Which, if his price level is going to go up substantially and higher than the current value, for instance, and Bitcoin sees one of those corrections again, what happens if he needs to sell? I think having one big party into Bitcoin where he is going to hold like, what is it, 5 to 10% of the total amount of Bitcoin, that's going to push back some investors because they don't really like such a big stake by one party. But overall, I mean, it's good. I think it's going to help become for Bitcoin to become the Bitcoin reserve asset that we want. But given that in this cycle institutional investors and governments are jumping in, I just don't feel like we are close to a top.
Do you think it's too late for someone to jump in now? What would your advice be to someone who is not exposed in crypto? Would you tell them to wait until there is a retracement? Would you tell them to DCA in? What would you say to them?
You know, it's always hard to jump into an asset when it's still in a sort of bull cycle. So if you look at a chart right now, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's Nvidia or stocks or equities or it's gold, everything is expensive at this point if you look at it from a US dollar perspective. But if you reverse that theory and you say, okay, well, I've got a certain inflation level of, let's say, 5 to 10% on a yearly basis, so I lose money, and they are going to inflate the M2 supply, or they are going to inflate the amount of money that's being created in the world, then maybe I don't want to have that asset because I lose value over time. And if you say, okay, well, maybe Bitcoin is going to correct substantially, what is the best strategy that I could do, knowing that Bitcoin has been doing 63% year on year as in terms of yield? The only thing you could do then, or make it easy for yourself, is to say, well, I'm going to read about Bitcoin. I'm going to get myself educated. My biggest portion of my portfolio is going to be Bitcoin and Ether. And I'm just going to DCA while keeping my job and my regular life because I'm not ready to go full time into crypto. But I want to change my life and I want to increase my purchasing power. And we are in the final sort of years where it is easy for you. And crypto is one of those opportunities. So I think starting is the good, but like the best way going forward. Delaying your start isn't the right way. You need to have skin in the game. But DCA, especially with Bitcoin, has been the best strategy over time. So that's how I would approach it. With altcoins, of course, it's completely different. They have more risk. They need to require more knowledge. So if there is more risk, then it should be less of your portfolio and just a tiny portion, the profits you make, you put into Bitcoin again. And if it is it too late? No, it's never too late. It's actually, I told this at a different podcast. I said, this is the first time since I started that I really feel like that we are having breakthroughs when it comes to crypto. The amount of innovations that we're seeing, that we're not in the echo chamber anymore, and the validation that we get from, for instance, Donald Trump or Brazil or the ETFs is something that is making me even more motivated to just keep on going. So you're still early in that sense, and you should just get started.
I love your answer. I completely agree, by the way. I think the time frame should be considered, right? Because most of the time people, God knows, read headlines on some random newspaper. They're saying, oh, this guy bought this meme coin and is now a multimillionaire. Yes, but there are certain things attached to it. So first of all, he or she can't sell because there's no liquidity in the project. Second of all, he or she is not the rule, is the exception. So most people actually buy the top and sell the bottom. That's how people get into crypto. Some of them, like you and me, stick around. And then what we learn in a couple of cycles is you have to extend your time frame and you have to invest into solid projects like Bitcoin, for example. Of course, you can go degen into alts and memes, but that's a completely different play. And if you think about it, I'm sure you're following the news as much as I am. You can see Michael Saylor talking to the CEO of Microsoft. You can see Rumble investing as a reserve 20 million in Bitcoin. So those companies have now just started thinking about Bitcoin as a store of value, kind of reserve currency thing. So you have the option to front run most of the companies on the planet. And if you think about market cap, we are now just below 2 trillion and gold is about 18. So I believe there is still room to grow in the asset itself. I mean, are you expecting also institutional FOMO, like companies going in and starting to accumulate to kind of protect their capital from inflation?
That's a good question. I think that at this stage it's already happening. So if you look at the market cap for Bitcoin, indeed, we are currently at like 3 trillion in total, and Bitcoin is like 2.1-ish, I guess. If you compare that to gold, it is still a tenfold to get there. While Bitcoin being so much more liquid than gold is, and there are some better cases than gold, but we're not going to discuss that. Then secondly, the fact that, for instance, Trump and those big companies are jumping into Bitcoin is a big validation. The reason why the US all of a sudden has turned on crypto and Bitcoin is because they see the rest of the world progressing with the adoption of crypto. I think Asia is leading big time when it comes to that. And also the Middle East is just taking some progressive steps there. So they can't fall behind. And that's the network effect of Bitcoin. So I think that that is really good. And if you look at bubbles in terms of sizing, I think the previous .com bubble that we experienced, and I often reference to that this cycle was probably going to be a .com bubble sort of size that we're going to be seeing where everything goes irrational to the upside and then crashes back down again. I think that the .com bubble was between 10 to 15 trillion in market cap and it lost like 80%. If you go back, move forward towards the current day, then the market cap with inflation accounted into it would be 30 to 35 trillion. Knowing the fact that Web3 is so much larger in all the narratives that we have than the internet alone, then 3 trillion is literally nothing. So I think that there is a lot of upside still to be made, many cycles still to come, many opportunities still to come. And something that we should realize is that there is so much institutional interest into Bitcoin because of the fact that they see that inflation is still high, but they also see that there are increased risk when it comes to the debt levels of the US. And at some point in time, when there's going to be a recession kicking in, it's not about, hey, the inflation is so high at this point, but the risks of the US dollar to default or banks to default has significantly increased. And if your default chances go up from like 0.5% to 0.8%, that's an enormous impact on all the balances of all those asset managers in which assets they want to have. So what you see is that if this ticks up a little bit, is that the allocations towards gold and Bitcoin significantly increases. And knowing that there is such an illiquid supply of Bitcoin at the exchanges at this point, because of so many retail investors still holding their Bitcoin, knowing the thesis of Bitcoin, then there is so much upside still to be made. So I think we are in the sort of perfect storm, and the institutional interest is increasing, and it's just firing up. I think ETH is also just firing up when it comes to that, and then in the next cycles it will be different examples. So yeah, we are getting there, I would say.
I had a chat with a couple of guests this month alone, and Some were saying to me, well, the fact that now the ETF is being played by institutions, that's a quote bad sign because they will sell as soon as it doubles. But the other guys said, no, no, no. I think institutions are going to be in for the longer game. I like most the latter. So I think companies, they are investing into Bitcoin, they are studying Bitcoin. They're not going to sell when we get to 120,000. I mean, there's going to be a portion of people that take profit on the way up. That's for sure. Nothing goes up in a straight line. But I like to believe that those companies, they buy the ETF. Like, it doesn't have to be Sailor, of course. But if you think about Rambos and potentially Microsoft, I don't think they are buying to double their money. I think they are buying to protect themselves from inflation. I don't know if you have the same view.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that if you go back into the cycles, then 2017 was quite retail driven, the ICO hype and all those things. Then in 2021, we saw the first like VC cycle. As a side note, the amount of VCs in crypto at this point have been going through the roof. So the parties that are going to be the biggest losers in the upcoming cycle are probably the ones that are in the VCs, as there are so many unexperienced people in those VCs investing in projects that they don't have any clue about. But this cycle is about institutional investors and governments, and you need those new groups to actually fuel the demand for Bitcoin. Otherwise, we will just be sticking around. So I think that once you go up with the markets in terms of price, then there will be a specific group of people that will be selling their position because they want to make more US dollars, or they want to rebalance their portfolio. Just like in 2021, we had the exact same thesis. And you should also realize that at some point in time, once the price goes up, who is going to buy Bitcoin? um, if you see Bitcoin at like 400 or 500K, the amount of people that are going to be buying Bitcoin is just going to be less. And the amount of people that are willing to sell their Bitcoin that have been holding for, let's say, us for 8 or like 13 years or 10 years, those will be the sellers. So you just have, that's just how a market works. I think the only thing when it comes to the ETF is that there will be a lot of people in there that have Bitcoin for the long term, just like they hold gold, as they know that on a year to year basis, there is a positive yield compared to inflation. But they don't really care about the flaws of a correction or a 3x pump in a year. That's just, they don't care. Which means that as long as Bitcoin progresses over time and the market cap becomes larger, let's say Bitcoin goes to 10 to 12 trillion during this cycle, the chances are significantly there that it's going to be moving around just like gold has been doing, and that Bitcoin becomes boring, but also becomes that safe asset that protects against inflation or the default of any currency that you have. So it's just, I mean, we're still getting an adult or in an adult stage for Bitcoin in such a fast notice that you kind of forget that markets actually should be very boring. But the good part is it's just less than 15 years since Bitcoin was created. And we're already in the case that pension funds are looking to allocate money towards Bitcoin. So that's just a part of the ride that you're taking when you're into Bitcoin.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes we forget this is a teenager still, and the amount of progress we've done. I mean, on the ETF alone, we broke every single record in terms of inflows, right? So, I mean, BlackRock alone is scooping up like crazy. Michael Saylor is coming in. You have Bhutan, you have El Salvador. So, players are
Hmm.
kind of identify themselves on who wants to do what. And I think all we need is like a big corporation like Microsoft or Apple in saying, you know what, we're going to just throw in 2% or 1% to be conservative, and then the thing's going to go to crazy levels. We discussed about the impact on Trump coming in, taking presidency in less than 50 days. So I don't think that's priced in, because if they, by any chance, start with this thing and they want to buy $1 million Bitcoin in 5 years, well, it's game on. I think we'll see other countries and Europe's all they will FOMO in, because at that point, not having a position means you are shorting against the asset. So I think it's going to be really interesting. Speaking about the markets, I mean, you mentioned ETFs. Are you also bullish on ETF on Ethereum? Because so far they are about to warm up. But if you remember, it was the same in Bitcoin when they announced the ETF. Actually, Grayscale sold a big portion, and now the volume is coming in. Are you expecting also Ethereum to pick up in volume?
Throughout the entire year, I've been super bullish on Ethereum, which maybe explains why I'm getting gray hair. Uh, I mean, Ethereum in itself is, by definition, the layer one that is probably the most compliant, secure, scalable, and safe one to use. So, especially if you look at BlackRock's tokenization fund and all the Web2 founders that are looking to build on top of ETH. I think Solana will get there too, but when you talk about DeFi and allocating funds into a safe blockchain, then the ETH DeFi is the one that still exists and is by far the largest out there. So I think that Ethereum is definitely heavily undervalued at this point. I think the markets are also representing that. And if you look at it from the ETF perspective, I think that once you're going to see an impact of the yields to fall, which might be during the coming months if the labor markets are getting weaker. The interest in ETH will increase from retail big investors that are looking for yield. Um, and it's also more interesting for institutional investors to allocate into ETH because they know that dynamics too. So I think that we've not seen yet what ETH can do. I often see that people are referencing to Cardano when they talk about ETH in the sense that ETH is now a dead chain. I think that that is completely nonsense. And by all means, if ETH is going to do what ADA was doing in the previous weeks, I'll be fine too. But I think that ETH has a lot of momentum still in there.
I'm so glad you said that. I've been bullish on it since when I discovered it in 2017. And the thing is, I've seen in the past few months specifically a lot of creators saying, "Oh, I'm selling my ETH for Solana," and I'm like, "Hey guys, I mean, I'm not bearish on Solana. I think Solana has a market. If you zoom back and if you see what's the use cases for Solana is meme coin, which is great, but it's a chain who goes down a lot. Is young, is still in beta apparently. Whether Ethereum is being more mature, right? It has an ETF attached to it, which is a lot to say. When institutions are going to say, "Oh, we missed the Bitcoin boat. What do we have next?" They're not going to look into Solana. They're looking into Ethereum, I think, as well as retail is more attractive. You know, they do the math and they think, oh, okay, well, Ethereum is like $3,000, $5,000. Bitcoin is already over 100,000. Let me buy some Ethereum, right? I think that would be the mentality. And of course, like you said, DeFi is on it. The argument that comes in from retail is Ethereum is expensive, but if you want to trade meme coins, yes, it's expensive. But if you want to build decentralized finance, I don't think it's expensive at all. So I am super bullish. I still have my Ethereum bag in play, and I'm not planning to sell anytime soon. I think we are massively undervalued, and I think we will see in this run ETH to some. I mean, I don't have a price target. I don't do these things anymore because it's pointless. But from where we are today, I think there's going to be a big, big appreciation coming in for sure.
If you like two answers on that, I mean, Solana is the retail chain where Ethereum was the retail chain. Like if you're a retail investor and you get into the crypto markets, I think you're still skewed to getting more risk in your portfolio and making the most out of it. That's why meme coins have been doing so great. That's why I think that XRP is doing so great too. And that's why I think that a lot of those altcoins that are in the ecosystems are going to go irrationally high. But Bitcoin and ETH are going to be stabilized a little bit more because ETH transitioned from being the retail chain with DeFi back in 2020 to an institutional chain where you can get proper yields for your money. Where Solana is a chain that has high throughput, is an issue solver or a problem solver for, let's say, memes, for instance, which you can create quite easily, which is heavily on the risk curve or at the end of the risk curve. But also Solana works for deepin, where you have a lot of smaller retail participants having their mobile phone being connected to a deepin platform or protocol, making $30 a month for your iPhone or anything that is possible and changing a lot of people's lives. I think that Ethereum is too expensive to handle all these transactions. And Ethereum doesn't aim to be that. Ethereum wants to be that financial system that we all want to explore where you can transfer value. So I think it's just a retail chain compared to an institutional chain. And I think it's fine. I think they have different purposes, just like AVAX has a different purpose, just like NEAR has a different purpose, just like Peak or IOTX with Deepin have different purposes, and that is fine. Most of the actual run with ETH is going to come out of nowhere, where people are like, why is this moving? And that's just because people are investing into ETH because they need ETH to get into Aave, for instance, or they need a stable coin which they need to transfer through the ETH ecosystem, and then the amount of transactions go up in ETH and ETH becomes deflationary. So I think overall, I'm quite positive on both. In terms of investing, I think Solana has seen a big run, and I think that the chart itself, but also the momentum, is saying that it's rotating towards ETH a little bit more, and I think that's fine. I think that DeFi and Deepin are going to be better. Where is it going to go to? I honestly don't believe. I don't know. If in my thesis I say, okay, Bitcoin, I expect to go to between 3 to 6x from here, let's just be conservative and say 3x, then I assume that at some point in time, Ethereum is going to double against Bitcoin because they have those runs where one of the two becomes overvalued to the other one. I think that at this point is Bitcoin is overvalued compared to ETH, and ETH needs to do a lot of running to get back to the same stages. I mean, Ethereum is up, or Bitcoin is up more than 50% compared to the all-time high of 2021. ETH is still down 30%, so that's where it comes from. And if you say, okay, Bitcoin does a triple and Bitcoin or Ether is going to do a double against Bitcoin, then that together would say a 6x is possible from here. So I think I'm using that as a reference. Of course, I don't know where it's going to go to. I'm positively surprised that we almost see a new all-time high on XRP. I was never expecting that, so I'm also not predicting prices anymore. But if I see XRP and if I see Bitcoin, then I'm quite sure that we go way higher than everybody expects.
Yeah, I mean, completely honest, I don't have any XRP in my portfolio, and I was not expecting anything like this coming through. But that's how crypto operates. You know, when everyone looks on the left, stuff on the right are happening. So the whole thing is always been like this. And are you planning to leverage this volatility at all? For example, if we know there's going to be a 2 to 4x on Bitcoin, do you have a portion of your portfolio that you sell DCA out, then rebuy lower, or are you just stuck in Sats and you don't play with it?
That's a good question because I do not have any Bitcoin. I had some good conversations with myself earlier this year in which I came to the thesis that I suspect that this is the final easy cycle for me where I can go all in, where I can take the risk. So I basically said, okay, I'm going to go into altcoins that are included in my thesis, and I want to maximize the amount of Bitcoin that I can take out of it. The reason for that is that this is my third cycle. I had a pretty roller coaster when it comes to my health. I'm currently very lucky to have a girlfriend, and we've got our own personal plans for the coming years that I can't dedicate my time entirely into crypto anymore. So I went into the risk curve, and my game plan is to make more Bitcoin. And if we start to run up and the altcoins start to accelerate, for instance, if I would have been into XRP at this point, I would be selling and rotating it towards the next altcoin because there's still the opportunity. But at some point, it doesn't make sense anymore. So then I rotate my bit or my altcoins back into Bitcoin and Ether. And if Bitcoin and ETH starts to go irrational, and if I walk outside, someone speaks to me and says, "Yo, Bitcoin is going wild," that's usually the moment for me to say, "It's time to start selling." But the reason why I'm selling Bitcoin is to make more Bitcoin in the crash. For me, my safe asset is Bitcoin and gold. So probably going to allocate more into gold. I don't believe in the US dollar at this point. So it's all a strategic decision to make more of the one that's safe and sound.
I have a portion of my portfolio that I use to speculate on some altcoins. And by the way, my choices are extremely limited. For example, I have a position in Chainlink. I have a position on Cardano since a while. There is only a few that I have. It's very conservative. I probably have a few because I don't want to stay to charts and trade. I just do long-term play. I will sell back into Bitcoin and or potentially stablecoin and wait until Bitcoin corrects down and then buy more Bitcoin. So similar to you. It's funny because some of the guests I speak to, they have a very aggressive strategy. They have no Bitcoin yet and they want to go all in into alts, maximize as much. And then on the way down, when Bitcoin quote corrects, then you go balls in and you buy as many Bitcoin as possible. Whether other maybe more like me, I'm more kind of conservative. I have my big chunk in Bitcoin, but I do play with a small percentage of my portfolio. I don't go too degen, even though every now and then I have a kind of fun play with alts and memes, but it's very controlled because I want it to be separate, because I've learned in the previous cycle that if you don't manage your portfolio saying, this is my long-term hodl and this is my play fun money, if you don't separate them, what I've seen, at least for me, is like I was playing the casino roulette too much and my Ethereum was going down. So I had to physically separate them.
You need to realize that trading altcoins is super hard. The thing is that they could go up in US dollar value, but then still against Bitcoin you're losing. So you need to time it well. You need to do it with a small portion. And like as I said in my previous answer as well, I think it's quite aligned with you. I will always have my crypto allocation, but if something goes through the roof, let's say Bitcoin went to 69K, and if I knew from my experience and I would change my behavior, then I would have reduced the crypto exposure that I have and reduced my risk within my crypto exposure to just Bitcoin alone and maybe some stablecoin staking. The reason for having an allocation is because you might always be wrong with the timing of selling everything. And once I hear people say, yeah, so I sell my altcoins and go into Bitcoin, and then I sell Bitcoin at the exact top and go into cash, I usually hear them 2 years later that they were still holding, because these people are referencing their portfolio to the actual peak, and that is 1 second. So if your portfolio is at 100K and it starts to go through the roof and you hit 500K, once there is a slight correction, you're like, I'm going to keep that portfolio because it's going to go higher. And then all of a sudden it starts to drop massively and you're like, here we go again. So
Yeah.
they keep on referencing to one screenshot that they have at the actual Pico peak, where you should actually reference to how much did I make this year in terms of percentage, and what's the average benchmark for people in general. So if I say, okay, Bitcoin has been doing 60% year to year, and if my portfolio does a 400% based on the fact that I'm in altcoins, it's on that alone, it makes sense to just de-risk the entire portfolio, because you were going out of the general thesis of your returns by a mile, and you should be celebrating that. So I think that trading altcoins in general is super hard, but it's also super fun. But I think that people underestimate the roller coaster that you need to go through and the heavy impacts. Like if you start a portfolio with 10K, for instance, and it goes to 1 million, like you don't know what the actual impact is of having such a sum of money with your like mental state. If you're like, it is 1 million, and you see on social media that it will do another triple, you're like, well, I'll keep it. While on the other hand, you just were having a tremendous lottery ticket, and on the way up, you should have been selling most of it already. So it's just you're playing around with everyone and their thesis and their emotions, and having a strict plan usually works the best, and that is in bull and bear markets, and most money is actually made in the bear markets instead of the bull markets.
Yeah, I agree. It's all about fear and greed. After all, they will control you and they will make you take decisions that you shouldn't have. But that's why companies like yours, like MN Consultancy, for example, come in handy, because you can say, hey, can you advise me on how to build a portfolio? Can you consult me on how to manage my capital? Because it's like you said so well, it's going to be so difficult for someone who has never done this kind of stuff to jump in, select a coin, decide when to sell, build a portfolio. Those things they are harder than they seem.
Look, with the MN consultancy, we've got a lot of clients, and most of their stories are that they were in the previous cycle and they just don't want to make the same mistakes again. And especially because the money that they invest into crypto is usually life changing once it go up. However, it's as I just said, it's super hard to make the right decisions. And in my opinion, the markets are getting way more complex than the previous cycles. You've got all the narratives, you've got all the macro dynamics. Probably the 4 year cycle, we are going to lose it. So, from my experience and from the team's experience, we just build a strategy for you to make sure that you actually make the most of it in a risk appetite that works and suits with you. That means that you're likely going to be selling earlier, but who cares? If you compound those returns through the years, then that's fine. If you maximize it in that way. And I think it is shifting that perspective from having the need to make the most within a year to having a thesis for the next decade where you just keep on compounding those returns. The only thing is that with the consultancy, we will continue for the coming months, but unfortunately, with Mikar coming in, we need to close down the doors of the consultancy as it's just too expensive to get the license with the company that we have. So we're going to rotate that into a fund where we have multiple strategies that we're going to be using, where clients are also plugging in, and we actually have the ability to amplify secondary market opportunities into the fund. We were also having the opportunity that once the bear market starts to kick in, to be hedging or to do the stablecoin staking and be more productive and having a bigger impact to our investors. So all in all, it's all created to have that positive impact for people that want to change their own lives.
Fantastic. And guys, as always, in the description you will find Michaël link. So if you want to have a consultancy, if you want to get in touch, please do so by using only the link in the description. Do not trust anyone else because out there is a jungle. So make sure to only click official links. But Michaël, man, it's been an absolute pleasure. You are a legend. It was so good to meet you in Singapore and again in Amsterdam. Hopefully our path is going to cross again.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm sure that we're going to be seeing each other at Token next year in Dubai. So looking forward to that, and good luck with the show.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And guys, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one. Cheers.